Good morning and welcome to Emerson Institute at City of Light. I'm Reverend Dr. Paul Gretz. Once again, it's a delight to welcome you to our class sessions, coming to you from the Dr. Angelo Pizzello Wisdom Center here at City of Light, located at 3125 Presidential Parkway in Atlanta, Georgia. Today's class is on the Book of Truth, and this is class number 6, and we are looking at the chapter on structure and truth. The Book of Truth is authored by Paul Selig, and he is presenting some interesting concepts for us to talk about today. So I'm glad that you've joined with us, and I hope that you are following along with your note packet. By the way, if you do not have a note packet but would like to receive one, please reach out to me at revtpaul@aol.com. Love to share the information with you. I'll pass it on to our registrar, Dr. David Carter, to make sure that you're included on the email list of notes that go out prior to every class session. These notes are sort of the cliff notes of our discussion and our chapter. So it's great for you to follow along and glean all the information and insights that you can. I encourage you to follow along on the notes with a little pen and jot down little things that really strike out, are really important to you, that really are more speaking to your spirit. And along with it, maybe other comments. So take notes and just use this packet of notes as a format for you for your study as we journey together. Now, to prepare for today's class, I'm going to invite you to take some deep breaths. This is a wonderful exercise of just bringing us into the now. You know, I'm sure that today your morning is filled with all kinds of distractions, all kinds of things as you've begun your day. And right now, it's really important that we just bring ourselves back into this moment right here and now and allow ourselves to release any kind of stress, worry, tension, things that may have occupied our thoughts that are distracting, and come right now into this moment where the Spirit of God is ready to speak to us in a very special way. So let's do this. Let's center our hearts and our minds by just taking 3 deep breaths. Breathe in through your nose, hold for a brief moment, and then we're going to breathe out, just releasing everything in a breath that's just pushing out, forcing out any kind of distraction. Join with me now. Let's breathe together. Breathe in and release. Deep breath in and release. Deep breath in and release. And set that intention. Express the desire of that which you'd like to receive during this class time that we share together. What would you like to get from this experience? And so it is. This wonderful breathing that we do, you know, it just brings in some fresh oxygen, clears the mind, clears the thought process, and sort of centers us into this moment. I'm glad that you are participating in that, no matter where you are. And let me just begin by saying thank you to those of you who are joining us from all across the world for these class sessions. It's always a delight to welcome our students from foreign countries and those who are joining us for our live streaming across the United States, Canada, North America, South America, etc. We also want to say that if you are ever having a challenge and you're trying to look for our classes, you can't find them on a Facebook, please go to our YouTube page. Our YouTube channel is City of Light Atlanta. You can go there and you'll find all of our workshops, services, etc. already libraried. You can go back several months and make sure that you have viewed classes that you might have missed. It's a great resource for us. Well, let's begin with class number 6 on structure and truth. And the author opens up with this interesting thought that a lot of people may have not really paid a lot of attention to. That the followers of Jesus Christ were simply known as people of the way. This is spoken of Acts chapter 9, verse 2, Acts chapter 24, and verse 14. It's really people of the way is referencing their lifestyle, the way that they lived. In other words, it was their lifestyle that identified them as being followers of Jesus Christ, not their words. So this was not a religion. It was not a dogma. It was not a doctrine that Jesus was preaching. Jesus was preaching a way of living. Jesus was teaching a lifestyle that is centered around living the prosperous, abundant life that he continued to speak about. It's not a religion that is really one that is full of all kinds of rules, but filled with all kinds of guidelines for success in the journey of our life. It was Jesus' teaching that was all centered around self-realization, that there is no duality and no separation between God and man, and that every one of us are all one in that divine presence. So let's just break that down as we really begin to examine the theology, shall we say, of Jesus. What was his message? First and foremost, what we're looking at is the understanding of self-realization, to realize who you are and what you are. How crucial this is for our spiritual life. Psalm chapter 28 and verse 6 from the Old Testament, which Jesus referred to the Hebrew Scriptures quite often and was a student of those Hebrew Scriptures. It is said, I have said, ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. Let's break that down. All, everyone, no matter what sexual orientation, race, color, creed, size, shape, you're all children of the Most High, and you are gods. You are gods. Now, people have a lot of trouble with that verse in Scripture. A lot of people want to ignore it, not address it. But what this Scripture is saying is that you are a revelation of the divine, and you are this expression of God. You're not the totality of God. No. God is this infinite universe, and you are a part of that infinite universe. So you are a God or an expression of the divine, a revelation of the divine. Jesus answered them and says in John chapter 10, verse 34, is it not written in your law? I said, ye are gods. When you look at these beautiful passages, what they're saying is, ye are gods because God created you in his image. And that means you have the attributes of God. What kind of attributes of the divine do you have? Patience. That's right. You came equipped into this world with patience. You just have to use it. Love, grace, mercy, forgiveness, kindness, compassion. All this and more are the attributes of the divine that you have within you. You came to this world equipped. Now, the thing is, you've got to work these tools. You've got to use these tools. You've got to express these tools. Let me tell you this, the more you express patience, the more patience you'll have. A lot of people say, oh, pray for me. I need patience. I need not pray that you get more patience, but simply you use the patience you have. You've already been gifted with it. You have the attributes of God within you. When we understand that, then we're called constantly to release those attributes, to put them into action. You're God's because, number one, you're God's son. Now, oh, wait. People want to say, wait a minute. Wasn't Jesus the only son? But are you not called a child of God? Well, what are you? Sons and daughters of God. You are sons of God. So the very example of Jesus being a son of God is the example for you and I, for our lives to look at, to see this is the example of the Son of God that you're called to live out as a son or daughter of God. Son of God really means that you are fully aware of the attributes of God within you. You're fully aware of who you are as a child of God. You're fully aware of these divine attributes that work within you, and you are God's because you're the representative of God on earth. How many times have you heard someone say, you're the voice of God, you're the hands of God, you're the feet of God? That's right. You're the representative of God here and now. You are the revelation of God. You are God's because when people see you, they should see God in you. That's right. That's why I think it's really important that when we look to one another, wouldn't it be wonderful if we said, good morning, hello God, hello revelation of God, hello expression of God. It's great to see you, expression of God. Great to see you, divine revelation of God. Calling forth, that's what our purpose in this world. The purpose in our world is that we might reveal God to one another, reveal who we are, and that is our self-realization, realizing who you are as a person, as a being in this world. This simply means that you are the reflection of God, you are a mirror of God. It means God is in you. That's right. Just take a deep breath right now and realizing, wow, God is in me. The power of God is within me. The strength of God is within me. The wisdom of God is within me. The intellect of God is within me. The very patience, grace, mercy, compassion, love of God is in me. My responsibility is to express it, to release it, expressing it, meaning, almost like to squeeze out the essence as you express something. Espresso, coffee beans, you have squeezed out the essence of the coffee bean. It has been expressed, okay? So what we find is you're called to be the espresso of the divine. That's right. Squeeze out the essence as if to just let it be expressed in the world around you. How have you set an intention today to reveal God? Have you said, I want to reveal God through the radiance of my expression and the love I share. I want to reveal God through the words I say. I want to reveal God through the actions that I share, through the kindness that I'm demonstrating. What choices have you made? What decisions have you made? Have you thought about how you will reveal God today? Because this is the very teaching of Jesus, that we might be the light of the world. The light. That's our calling. That light being the brilliance of the wisdom of God, the brilliance of the love of God, the brilliance of the grace of God, the brilliance of the compassion of God, the brilliance of the very forgiveness that God is all about, the love, all these essence. We're called to radiate that. So just go about radiating the divine. That's right. Radiate it. Walk into the room and go, there is an intensity of energy flowing out of me, and it is the divine all around. We want to, when we encounter one another, experience this love of God, this divine expression at all times. We will do that when we set intention and we set it as our purpose. I am here to be the light of God, to be the light in this world. So what we want to see is that this is a core value of the teaching of Jesus, one that is so frequently overlooked and not really taken to heart. So what happens is Jesus was teaching a way of living that says you are the divine and you're called to express God, reveal God. A lot of people are like, whoa, wait. No. God is not in me. God is way off on another planet. God is somewhere out in space. God is up in the clouds. God is far and removed. God is so distant from me. And a lot of people begin to think and follow that kind of theological belief. Then they try to say, but I like to think that sometimes I'm a child of God, and sometimes is not very powerful when we're saying sometimes. And we like to think, maybe God in God's grace and infinite compassion will have forgiveness and stop punishing me and will somehow allow me to be a revelation or to reveal something in a nice word, but forgetting that this power is radiating in you, waiting to be expressed. You came into this earth as a soul. That first breath of the divine that you took, that breath of life, brought with you all the essence of the divine in you. That soul is complete and whole and is filled with the essence of God. And that's who you are. Now, it's that soul that dwells within this physical body, but you are not that physical body. You're so much more than that. You are the divine expression. So we have seen theologies kind of move away from that to say, wait a minute, you're not divine in any way. You're born a sinner. And oh boy, we got to have extra S's with sin, don't we? Sinner, just got to make it extra painful to hear, or extra guilt-ridden, or extra shame imparted because you're a sinner. You hear these evangelical preachers kind of preaching with that kind of passion, calling out and naming you as a sinner as if you are someone who is born in original sin and your true nature is to be evil. But that's not how God created you. What does the scripture say? You're created in the image and likeness of God. Can we not comprehend that? Pause for a moment and really comprehend that the soul within you is this divine expression. So why then would we create any kind of theological ideas that say we're unworthy, or that we've been created unworthy of God's goodness, that we're somehow, scum of the earth, that God is just finding us to be abominations and not in relationship with us, or that God is separate and removed in any way from our lives? This is the crazy thing, because there is no separation. And when we look at that and understanding, this is another aspect of Jesus' teaching. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. He didn't say, the Father, sometimes, I connect with him, maybe if I've had a good prayer life or I've done some good things. He said, no, I and the Father are one. The words that I speak are the words of the Father, the words of the source, the divine within me. There is a oneness here. There is not a separation. And so it is that when we awaken to this, that the divine in you is already present and there is no separation. We find Deuteronomy 31:6 says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Now, when we are forming theology, a lot of pastors and Christian traditions are teaching that God will not always hang out with you, that there's a limit, that God says, I write you off, I quit. You're done. I've cast you out. I don't want anything to do with you. I will now punish you. I will leave you. I will turn my back on you. But wait a minute. What do we do with this passage then that says God will never, ever, ever, ever leave you nor forsake you? You know why he can't? Because you are the expression of God. You are a revelation of God. How can God leave his own revelation? Because that would be God leaving God, right? So when we understand that you are made in this image and likeness, you're created in this image and likeness, it's like a earthly father trying to disown his son. You can never disown your son because your son is made of you, the DNA. Now, you may try to dismiss, you may try to say, I want nothing to do with them, but that child will always be your son. You can never change that. You can't change the essence within that physical being. The DNA is there. That child will always be your child. So it is, we will always be the children of God. We will always be the expression of God. So God will never leave nor forsake. So for us to think that God would send us somewhere to burn in hell and be tormented forever, that would be saying that God is sending God's own self to be tormented, that God wants to punish God's own self. But you see, this hell that's spoken of is the hell we create in our consciousness, in our mind, and we have the opportunity to liberate ourselves from any of that by the choices we make, by the experience of welcoming a new thought, by being that born-again person who engages in this transformation by the renewing of our mind. Let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. And that mind understands God will never leave nor forsake you. So we also have to understand that when we're looking at the teaching of Jesus, the way of Jesus, is that Jesus was really bringing out that there is no duality. There's no good and evil, and there's no us and them. You know how easy it is for us to think, well, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. You are less than. I am elevated above. And we think that sometimes there's also this warring nature that you're an enemy, you're an enemy. I'm the good person, you're the bad person. And we try to create this duality, and even to the extent of belief that there's a partiality, that God prefers some tribes, religions, groups, or people more than others. But we find in Romans chapter 2, verse 11, for there is no partiality with God. In God, it says there is no Jew, no Greek, no male, no female. He could go on and on. The writer could explain that there's no tall, no short, there's no gay, no straight, there's no this or that, because God is not seeing any kind of duality or separation or any of this kind of thing of one being better than the other. There's no partiality. And that's what Jesus was speaking of. And that's what we find brought about throughout the New Testament and echoed throughout the ages in ancient truth. Now, we also have to understand that there really is no evil, but we create evil. We give power to evil. But evil does not have its entity or strength on its own. So when we understand this, it's like darkness. What happens to darkness when the lights go on? Where'd it go? It disappeared, right? Does darkness have a power of its own when the light goes on? No, right? It's gone. It disappears just like that, right? So when we understand that, evil being darkness, it has no power of its own unless you give it power. It's like darkness has no power unless you shut off the lights and give it power, right? Then darkness has power because you gave it power. But what if you left the light on all night long? Is your room dark? No, darkness can't come in. Darkness has no power unless you give it power. Evil has no power unless you give it power. How about we understand the teaching of Jesus and that's stop giving power to evil? Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. In other words, shift your consciousness. Don't be overcome by constantly feeding power and giving power to evil, and constantly focusing on, oh, this is evil, that is evil, look at that, oh, I'm worried, I'm stressed, I'm worried, I'm troubled over all this stuff. Stop. Stop giving it power. Because let me tell you this. Isn't it interesting when someone wants to attack you with verbal attacks of words and you ignore them? What happens? Their power is gone. Because what they wanted was for you to rise up and give energy to their words. But when you don't give energy to their words, their power is gone, right? Steve has a comment.
Yeah, even if you support it or fight against it, you're still feeding it.
Yep. Anytime you support evil, fight against evil, resist evil, what you're doing is you're acknowledging this and you're giving it power through your acknowledgement. So this is why, if someone comes to you and wants to verbally attack you, let's just say, and call you names, and you just respond with great love and there's no resistance to it, you smile and you radiate the love of God right back. What happens is their power is gone. I've shared this story, but it fits. It's very apropos again. Years ago, I was walking down the streets of Minneapolis and someone called me a faggot. From across the street, they yelled, faggot, sissy. You know what? I walked across the street and said, hi, I'm Paul Gretz, and I'm one of the best faggots you've ever met. And I am a great sissy, and I'm glad that you acknowledged my feminine side. I also have a masculine side, and I could show that to you too. But right now, I'm so glad that you've acknowledged my feminine side. Something tells me you've got great gaydar. Whoa. The guys go, I don't have gaydar. No, I have nothing gay. I'm straight. I don't have any part of it. Suddenly, his power was diminished because I was not in resistance to it. I respond in a loving, positive way and feeling like, you know what? The word faggot is only bad if I think that it's bad to be a faggot, right? But if I don't think it's wrong to be gay, then what's wrong with it? For me to be called a sissy would mean to say I would only find harm in it is if I thought being a woman or being feminine was something wrong or less than. But if being a woman is not less than or something wrong, or being feminine is not something that is demeaning, I would say, I think women are wonderful and how beautiful, how fantastic. So, if you see that in me, good, that you're seeing something beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful, full of the feminine, of the divine expression in a feminine manner. Wonderful. Because I don't find those things to be hurtful or causing any kind of resistance, that I need to be in resistance to those things. So when we are in that frame of mind, we are not giving power to any kind of evil, and we diminish this sense of a duality. But in our world today, duality is supported. Every book and novel has a plot which says there's good against evil, and good is fighting against evil. And somehow we've adapted that even in our religion to think the devil is going to overcome God. Really? I thought you said God was all powerful. I thought you said God was omnipotent. How on earth then do you think that the devil has any power unless you give it power? So when you're giving negative thoughts power, you're actually strengthening it, reinforcing it. But when you stop giving those negative thoughts power, they go away, right? Because they diminish. They have no power of their own. It's only the power you give it. So in our world, there is no duality unless you want to create a duality. And this is where Jesus spoke, and the whole essence of our spiritual life is that when we know that all things work together for good, that consciousness says my focus is on all things, everything, every aspect of my life is good. There's not a duality of good and evil. There's all things working together for good. So we know that, we claim that, we live that, and we diminish any sense of this competition or this warring or this sense of, God created a devil to fight against him, that God created an adversary so that he might have more challenges and, all this kind of stuff. What kind of theology have we created? We really have to ask ourselves. It's time to get back to being people of the way of a lifestyle. And that lifestyle is centered around truth. Truth, ageless, timeless truth that Jesus was teaching and that is revealed to us through the scriptures. So what we want to understand this is that quite often there were many practices introduced in religion, and I'm on the top of page 3, that were introduced for control. They were founded in the teaching of fear. Doctrines of things like unworthiness, a big doctrine found within so many in the traditional Christian movement. A big doctrine that says, we were born unworthy of God's goodness and grace. Yet they say we're a child of God, but that child was created unworthy. That child was, what kind of parent births a child that isn't birthed with every kind of equipment and the highest and best, in intention and in desire? God wants the highest and best for us. Jeremiah chapter 31 says, the plans God has for you are to prosper, not for you to be sensed like, oh, you're unworthy and you're not worthy of God's goodness. But God's plan all along is that you are worthy of the prosperity of God. Then there are doctrines of this separation, that God is some sort of punisher to be feared. And we look at that passage that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. It is respect. Respect for the spiritual laws is the beginning of wisdom, not fear that I'm afraid or terrified. And
so I'm thinking this, because this lesson that I'm going to tell you about is not over with yet, but my grandson is in 4th grade and there was a bully. He was pushing Harrison down to make his knee got bloody, and then the next day he pushed him down again and it got bloody again and he had to go to the nurse. And Heather was writing emails to the school and reporting it, and they were not doing anything, and they were talking with Harrison at night about avoiding him. No one ever said to him, punch him back.
Right.
And finally the principal called Heather, and then Heather was pretty firm. She's a professional woman and she's educated and she's on the same level as this principal. And the principal got a little nasty with her, and Heather just stopped and said, wait a minute, this is my son that you are talking about. And so as it was, I didn't know any of it was happening, and Harrison came to me right away the other day and he said, you know what, there was a kid in my school and he was expelled. And I said, wow, But I encouraged Heather to go to the priest that's the head of the school to gain a spiritual understanding. And I said, the problem is we know that kid is troubled. He's not evil. Right. We don't believe in evil. He's troubled. He's either sick or, missing something in his life, whatever. But it's easy to fall into that pattern. And, we can't be in bliss all the time. But I thought it was a perfect, substantial lesson. The part that I don't understand yet is how Harrison must have brought that to himself. You know how we say
Right.
we bring lessons
Right.
to ourselves, because he's not an aggressive child.
Right.
So that'll come out.
But what a wonderful lesson he's experiencing as he sees a bully and he sees the consequences of bullying. He's going to be a richer child for a better, have a better understanding of life. Now, certainly that bully child, as you said, is struggling with some insecurities. Bullies are immensely insecure.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is address and nurture that insecurity, help it to be healed and to be released in that child. That's really what we need to do. Hopefully that, if you can befriend those who are bullies and just love them back, that's the greatest thing, because what they're looking for is something that meets that inner need within them of their insecurity.
Well, the one really good thing is that Harrison has now got the idea that his parents have his back.
That's another good.
That gives him the concept of God that's coming along, in his little life. And that I'm very happy. That's a happy part of this. But
Yes, even in the midst of all of our challenges in life, there's something good that we can learn from it, something valuable to experience, no matter what we're going through. When we understand that, we can see that there are blessings to be found even in the midst of a storm.
yeah.
So what we want to look at is also the very ideas of doctrines of God forsaking someone. This that is so fear-based. And I can't tell you how much of, shall we say, traditional biblical literalism is grounded in fear-based teaching. They want to constantly bring fear to your life. I know I was a fundamentalist minister years ago, grew up in that tradition, and I know the fear-based teaching and how predominant it is to manipulate people. I'm going to tell you this. If I all told you were all going to burn in hell if you didn't do what I wanted you to do, you would all say, well, I don't want to burn in hell. So I really, I'm going to follow what you're saying. That fear is what manipulates. So we believe things so long without question. And the author is bringing this out, that the Spirit guides are trying to help us to understand in the journey of our life that we have been fed a lot of stuff in this world that we don't question. And I think what we want to do is call out questioning everything. Question things. How do you learn? But by asking questions. So it's really important that we are, in our spiritual life, questioning these things that we might learn through them. Questioning is not a bad thing. Questioning is the way that I like to say, like pulling taffy, you work it out, you stretch it out, you kind of find the solutions as you work out, seeking the answers. And what we're called to do and be in this world is a seeker. A seeker is one who asks questions, a seeker of wisdom that says, I want to learn, I want to understand, but I'm not just going to sit there and be fed if I don't quite comprehend. I need to ask the question. So what happens is some of these beliefs that have been fed to us that we haven't asked questions about, the author calls them a boulder, like a boulder in your pathway. And these boulders then shape the way we see the world. So let's just think about it. If we're believing in that God is separate from us and that we are not a revelation of God, then we can look to someone else and say, well, you're not a revelation of God. You're not a revelation of God. You're not a revelation of God. I am feeling separate from God, and that I'm feeling separate from you. Because I often question, how is it in our world today, how is it humanity could put anyone into slavery? How could you choose someone, go out and capture someone, bring them in to serve you as a slave if you felt you were one with them? But because you don't understand oneness and you don't understand that the God in them is the same God in you, and there's no difference between you and them, no matter what they may look like, that separation theology that they bought, that they're separate from God, also is enacted on their life that they can be separate from someone else. And I can have power over you, and I can abuse you, and I can oppress you. But when we realize instead that we're all one, that the same God in me is the same God in you, the same DNA, the same power, the same presence is the same in you, how can I oppress or diminish or abuse someone who is part of this overall experience that we call God? You're part of it, I'm part of it, we're in this together. But why would we abuse one or call one less than when we realize we're all one and all the same? So we see that these things become boulders in how we shape our world. We may see a boulder of good and evil, and we're constantly focused on evil and that fear then becomes a major pathway in our world, and we have difficulty seeing good, seeing blessings, seeing prosperity, seeing these things because there's so much fear and so much of a sense of evil within our life. So the boulders are so great that you are in fear, and you're actually in fear of removing them. You know, I have people constantly say, you know, this belief I grew up with doesn't work for me, but I'm afraid to let it go because I just know that that's what my culture, my society has constantly brought over and over and over and over again. It took me a while as a gay man to find self-acceptance and to love myself for who I am, because my culture said God doesn't love gay men. And yet I'm like, wait a minute, this can't be right because I feel God's love. I know God loves me, but yet I held onto that boulder. And that boulder shaped how I looked at life. So I became very removed and alienated myself from a lot of people because I didn't want people to maybe know anything intimate about me or deeper about me. That I was innately my true self as I was born as a gay man. But I tried to hide that. So I lived in the closet. I tried to hide things. And through that lack of self-acceptance, I became more critical. You see how these things shape your outlook when you allow these boulders of fear to occupy space within your life, and you're afraid to remove them because your culture, your society, everything has reinforced them. And then it only happens when you begin to ask the question, wait a minute, does God really love me? Yes. Do I feel the love of God? Yes. Then how can I be an abomination unto God? And if God knows that I'm gay, and I've always been gay, and I never chose this, you see, the series of asking questions began to break through that boulder, and little by little sort of chisel it away until that boulder broke and exploded into melted little stones that could easily be removed as like gravel just plowed away in my pathway. Just know this, that fear claims more fear. When you are embracing any kind of fear, it's only going to claim more fear. Fear is going to attract more fear. So if you're fearful of one thing, it's going to attract more fear to you because you're becoming comfortable. You're giving energy to the darkness, shall we say. Because what's happening is as you embody more fear, you're sort of shutting off the light and giving more power to the darkness. You're shutting off the awareness of the good and you're giving more power to the evil. So what happens is fear claims more fear in the journey of our life. So we stop the fear, and before you know it, it all begins to diminish, and we live in this wonderful understanding of God's blessings. People are afraid to leave their bondage because their bondage is the teaching that they've learned to love. And I met so many people who would say, oh, I've just learned to love the fact that God likes to punish. I've learned to love because I grew up with this. I'm unworthy. I've learned to love that. Oh, when I sing these songs, I'm so unworthy. I'm trash. I'm a worm. I am a wretch. I am nothing. I'm scum of the earth. And we sing these songs because we've loved them and we've wept and cried with us and this wonderful feeling of God's presence in our life through this sense of unworthiness. And yet we're afraid to give that up, to say, you know what? I'm worthy of God's goodness. Why? Because I am God's child and the divine dwells within me. And every time I say I'm unworthy, what I'm saying is the presence of God is not good enough. And let me tell you this. We talk about passage of scripture says, do not use the Lord's name in vain. Name reflects your character. In ancient times, names were chosen to reflect someone's character. Today, we pick a name out of a book because it sounds pretty when we name our children. In ancient times, they named children to evoke this is the desired character that they'd like to see. So a lot of people looked at the history of names, the backgrounds of names. They created names that had a meaning. The very name that we call the I am has immense meaning. The I am that I am, and that's what God is. The name of God is I am. Yes, I am. And that I am lives within you. When Moses said, who shall I say is going forth that I go forth in what power? I wonder what name do I go before the Pharaoh? And the burning bush spoke to him, said, go in the I am that I am. Go in the knowing that the power of God is in you. And be that. Be the light. Be the radiant beam. Be that. Now, when we say, I'm stupid, I'm not capable, what are we saying? We're actually we're saying the character of God is stupid because you are the revelation of God. And that is taking the Lord's name, character, in vain. It's not when you use the word God or Jesus Christ or whatever, those kind of things. What we really have to understand is what we're doing when we insult the divine presence in our life by saying, I'm unworthy and I'm not good enough. And this is where, again, we awaken to self-acceptance when we understand who we are. And it begins to remove that bully's insecurity when he begins to understand he, too, is a child of God. And he, too, is a divine creation. Carla has a comment.
It's interesting because you said that things have the meaning that we give them. And so for me personally, when I say child, I kind of think separate, like I'm separate from my mother. And so in one of his other books, he talks about being an individuation of God. And for me personally, it's easier if I call myself an individuation of God, because then I'm part of, but I'm not separate. That's just how it works in my mind. And so when I can realize that, and know that I just am love, so then I'm not thinking that this God outside of me loves me, but that I am love. And when we be love, we can't be anything other than.
Right.
Because we are love.
Beautiful. And I love this because here's again for each and every one of us, Scripture says, work out your own salvation. Find the somatic or the word, the somatics that fit for you, that help you understand and grasp this comprehension. We were talking about spiritual laws and people didn't like the word law, so we used the word spiritual promise. So I love it, Carla. You're finding those words that really resonate with you, that help you be able to explain this whole understanding of who and what we are. Beautiful. Excellent. I love it. You're an individualization of the divine. You are that wonderful expression. Great. What would happen if we let go of our fear? What would happen if you let go of every fear in your life? What kind of life would you live? How amazing that would be. Yet, do we not embrace fears? And yet we're called to be fearless. And that we can live a life that is fearless. When we simply remove any kind of fears and walk by complete trust and faith. Because what have you come here to learn? I think it would be really interesting if we just all took some time out to say, let's look at our life. Most of us here that are in this class are a little more seasoned in the journey of life. We're not necessarily young whippersnappers or kids, although you look great and you're looking awfully young today and you're looking fabulous. We know that you've traveled the world of life a little bit longer than most people. And so what would you say that you've learned? If you could look back and really write a journal and say, what have I learned? What lessons? Because here's the big thing is we've come here to learn. And many things have come into our being because we have not stopped to question them. We've not stopped to learn. And through questioning, we learn. So we've not stopped to really examine and say, what is this experience all about? What is this? Let's just take for a moment, let's use what's happening in current events right now here in Atlanta. What are we called to learn? Let's hear from you. What would you think that we're called to learn from the gas crisis? People hoarding gas, people buying gas. There's not enough gas to go around. What do you? This experience we're going through. What can we learn from this? Anyone have some feedback? What would you say that you've learned or could learn, or what are we called to learn? How about not to live in fear? Because when we are fearful, we hoard, don't we? So the people who are running to the gas station with these extra 5-gallon gas tank containers, trying to fill up 100 of them and taking all the gas, what are they doing? They're in fear, aren't they? So we've seen immense demonstrations of fear. We saw it, of course, in the pandemic when everyone bought out the toilet paper. Terrified that their life would be like what their life would be like without toilet paper, they bought up an abundance of toilet paper, and so there wasn't enough to go around. But that fear created a hoarding experience, which created more challenges for other people. So what might we learn? We might learn that we have nothing to fear, and that all things are going to work together for good, even in the midst of this gas crisis. And it already is. The pipeline's being opened up, and gas is coming our way. So do we need to hoard? Do we need to take from others, or can we just take what we need? And I think what we need to learn in life is take what you need, but know that there's always more going to be coming. But it's our fear that says, there won't be more, there won't be more, there won't be more. There won't be more toilet paper. The end of toilet paper is now. And if I don't get that last roll, there will be never more toilet paper in all eternity. And I got to stock up for eternity right now. Well, that's crazy. But that's what fear says. Carla.
Well, just to what you're saying there is that we do attract more fear. In any moment, we have the option of how we're going to perceive something or how we're going to respond. We can go with a positive or a negative. And essentially, in his books, what I get out of it is he's saying, whatever path we choose, that sort of sets a trajectory. And so if we respond in fear and we hoard that gas, we are bringing more fear to us because we're creating that atmosphere of fear. So that's the reality that we're creating. And so if instead we have that faith, we just say, my path will be lit as I take the step, and we create the light, then that light spreads, and then that's what we're going to share around and draw more to us. And he also says that we cannot attract into our life that which we are not in alignment with,
right,
or agreement with. So if we give consent, even implied consent, by not standing up for something that we believe in, that's implied consent. And he said that's the same thing as alignment, and so that's what we bring into our life. So we don't want to be aligned with fear. We don't want to create that just by filling up that extra thing of gas. We're creating that atmosphere of fear.
Right. Yes. And the beautiful example, the children of Israel, as they were in the wilderness, were fed manna from heaven on high. But yet in fear, some wanted to go out and say, there won't be enough. Is there a guarantee that manna will come tomorrow? So I'm going to go and collect for the next week. And what happened? It spoiled. So what happened is that manna spoiled and it rotted, and it brought, shall we say, a challenge for people because they now had this smelly, nasty, rotten food because they didn't trust. And fear brought the consequences of something rotten, nasty, and a mess in our lives when we embrace more and more fear of saying, I'm going to need a hoard. There's not enough. But what was being taught to the children of Israel through their experience was every day there is a fresh new manna for us. Every day there's something fresh and new from God. Every day there's something fresh and new in blessings and provision. God's plan is for you to prosper. That plan doesn't end. It's an ongoing plan. So when we do that, we think in that way, we release this fear. So what we understand is that this world that we live in is our great teacher. Wow. Not just our individual experience, but everything that's going on in this world is there to support you in realigning, getting into alignment with your highest and best. So we talked about this in several classes back about, what's really beautiful is to watch the news so you know what to pray for. Because, when you watch the news, rather than getting all upset about it, it says, I need to know what to treat. I need to know what to pray, and I'm treating for God's goodness. I'm treating this evil that we may see, or this darkness that is wanting to rise up that people are walking in, or this fear that they're living in, and I'm speaking good, and I'm not in resistance to it, and I'm not in being caught up in fear about it. But this is what I know. I treat for the wonderful success of the disease and COVID-19 in India, as an example. When you see it in the news, I now treat and begin to pray for goodness and seeing God's blessings there. So you might say, I look at the news and I see ways for the world to speak to me about realigning myself, getting in alignment with truth, and remaining there, staying there at all times with the highest and best. Because let me tell you this, if you're willing to be taught, key thing, willing to be taught, your life will be your teacher, and you'll find it to be remarkable, and that life will be a wonderful teacher for you. If you're willing to be taught. Because the stories of your life are wonderful teaching lessons, and just as the parables of Jesus were stories of life and were teaching lessons for the ancient, so it is that your stories are wonderful teaching moments. And I think it's beautiful if we could sit down and learn lessons, write lessons from every day in our life. Have a journal that this is the lesson I learned today. Wow, how powerful that would be to share that with family and friends, relatives, your community. Because if we begin to seek out the moral, seek the lesson, what's the truth that's being experienced here? I'm going through this for a reason, but what's the reason? What do I need to learn here? I need to learn something, because every day our journey on this earth is a teaching experience if we're willing to be taught. I'm going to tell you this. The Spirit of God is speaking to you right now. It's ever speaking. The voice of God is ongoing. It's always speaking to us. But our problem is we're not attuned to listen, to know what is God saying? What is God speaking to you about? Because this is what that wonderful voice of God, the divine, is that great teacher, unfolding infinite wisdom for us. You know, we are in the school of wisdom right now. That's right. It's called life. It's a school of wisdom. We're here to learn. The soul is here to evolve. You think your soul is here just to come and what? Not grow? Not mature? Not evolve? Everything in life is evolving. And you're called to evolve too. So when we are open to being taught, we begin to see the lessons that the Spirit is teaching us. When you know the truth of who you are and what you are, you realize that the same truth is true for everyone. That's amazing. Because if I'm a child of God, if I'm an individualization of God, I like that. If I'm a revelation of God, then you must be one too. Wow. That begins to change our whole thinking, because if I think the same God is in me that is in you, and the same God that is in you is in me, wow, how do I treat God? How do I love God? I don't know, people say, oh, I know how to love God. I go to church, I shake a tambourine. We have a praise band. We just sing and dance. We do the Holy Ghost dance. We've got a great choir. We sing for 45 minutes. We're loving God. And then they walk out and go, I hate you. I can't stand you. I'm going to cut you off in traffic. What were you doing here? I'm judging you. I'm punishing you. I'm speaking ill of you. Wait a minute. But you're God. You're God. You're God. You're God. How did I treat God? Well, and yourself. Exactly. How do we treat ourselves? Did I do a little loving God today? A little self-care? A little love of God right now? You know, how did I treat myself? How did I respect myself? How did I honor God in me and in others? You see, it's not just singing a song or singing a bunch of hymns and that's how we love God. But we love God by the demonstration, by the way we live. Again, the early followers of Jesus were called people of the way, a way of living, a way of lifestyle. Not a doctrine, not a dogma, not a religion, but a way of living. So when you forget that God is the source of all things, and not you, not your paycheck or your job, you are now focusing on a limited source and you hoard in fear. When you forget God's your source, instead you're thinking, I know what my source is. It's my paycheck, and it's limited. Or I know what my source is. It's my job, and I may lose it. Or I know what my source is. It's, my Social Security or whatever it may be. And you think that's your source. We really then move into realms of fear because those sources are extremely limited. But when we know that God is our source and God is infinite possibilities, wow, you've got an unlimited source right there. And when you realize God is your source, you're more apt to say, I can share because I know there's more coming to me. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just live in the understanding that there's more coming to you, not less? But our fear says there's not enough. But in God, when we realize who we are in our relationship to the divine source, there's always enough, always enough. For God is ever making a way when in our little minds, we can't see a way, but God always does, for God is our true source. So our work is to release all ties that we've made in our world with fear. Wow, think about how our connections are with fear. In our religion, in our spirituality, in our journey of our life, we've tied ourselves in some shape or form with fear. And here's what we need to do is wake up this morning and say, I am not afraid. I am not afraid. There is no fear in my life. I have no reason to fear, for God is with me and will never leave me nor forsake me. I am courageous. I am bold. I am dynamic. I am the revelation of this infinite power of possibilities. Because when we know who we are, what the beautiful thing is, we no longer live in guilt, because guilt is an aspect of fear. Guilt is an aspect of fear. So our journey is to just release all fear. And you know what? We release all sense of guilt. We release all sense of guilt. That guilt and shame and self-hatred that want to constantly oppress us and keep us from living our highest and best. Now, what we want to understand here is that right now, we need to give permission, we need to give our consent to agree to truth in all commitments and in all choices, that we're living these truths. We're going to agree to it and start singing the song of freedom. I am free, I am free, I am free because I know who I am. I'm free from fear. I'm free from doubt. I'm free from worry. I'm free from stress because I know who I am. Who am I? I'm a child of God. I'm a revelation of God. I'm an individualization of God. I'm the mirror of God. I am the light that Jesus spoke of for the world. I am that illuminating presence that is lighting the pathways for others. I am free. I am free. I am free because I know who I am. When we grasp that, we're now moving in to the growth and the expansion, the evolution of the soul that we're called to claim and to live out in this journey. I'm so glad you joined us for our class today. Thanks so much for being with us here at the Emerson Institute. And as we conclude our class, it's really powerful that we take a moment to ask you, what's your takeaway? What are you taking away from this session? What spoke to you? What nugget? And I love to hear this from each and every one of you because you know what? You teach me. Because each one of you gets something different. Like, oh, I like that. Oh, that was a good one. Oh, I appreciate that comment. I love that individualization. I love your story about Harrison and the bully. I love all these comments that you're making because they are wonderful contributions to help us in the experience of learning together. So I want to hear, what's your takeaway? Let's go over to Carla first and tell us what's your takeaway from today's class session.
So much. This is one of my favorite books. I like all of his books. One was that, as you were speaking, it occurred to me that as I am an individuation of God and God is source, that God is also my source of whatever my needs are. So I don't have to worry or live in fear because I am, as God, I am also providing what I need by believing that and knowing that I am an individuation of God. So that kind of occurred to me. The other thing that you were saying, excuse me, I choked on my throat here. I am fearless. I say daily I am statements. I know who I am in truth. I say that daily. And I say, and what have been doing too is thinking, what are the words that I associate with God? radiance and intuition and knowing and love and peace and joy and all those. And so I do that all the time, like when I'm in the shower or when I'm driving or whatever. I'm like, I am radiant, I am vibrant, I am strong, I am healthy, I am intuitive, I am love, I am joy, I am grace, I am generous. All these things, because that's what God is. And I want to remind myself that I am not separate from God, that I am everything that God is, because that's what we are blessed with. That's our inheritance, being part of God. And just also that to remind myself that my limits are only the limits that I put on myself from inherited beliefs, which he talks about, that our beliefs are inherited, and that it's been interesting to examine what do I believe and what do I know is true, or what is it that I've been told to believe is true.
Right.
So much. I could go on and on, but I'll let everybody else have a turn. But
Good.
I really enjoyed this class. I'm so glad you did it. Thank you.
I love it. Great. Let's go to Brenda. What's your takeaway?
I think when I first realized that I was God and really knew it, the fear disappears.
Yes, right.
The guilt disappears. And there's just a calmness.
Beautiful. Excellent. And what's your takeaway?
That's really nice. I like that. One thing, this is small, but one thing that I learned from the gas crisis is that this area is so heavily populated. There are so many people here. And I've got to expand my thinking a little bit about taking care of myself and making sure I have enough gas. And Seelig, he either wraps this book up or starts another book with the idea that if it's dark, there's light somewhere. Everything is not dark, and so when I think I'm in the dark or struggling, I need to remember that I am the light, because I am God. God is me. So I had a lot of ideas here today that kind of opened up.
Beautiful. Let that light out. Just let that light out. We don't ask the light to come in. We let the light out because the light's already present within us.
And
Steve, tell us what your takeaway is from today's class.
Another way of thinking about new thought is if you're learning new thought, you're learning about right thinking. And the purpose of right thinking is to learn how to do right living. And for me, I believe that, in order to engage in new thought, the bare minimum you have to have, to start off with, is to see divinity in everybody. Now, we can talk more about, isn't divinity in everything, the buildings and the trees and everything? Yeah, we can. But the bare minimum is you have to see divinity in everybody, because that's pretty much where all our conflict is. It's always with somebody else. Not really something else, but somebody else. If you can't see divinity in anybody, you're not in new thought. Whatever else you learn about new thought won't matter, because if you can't get that one down pat, seeing divinity in everybody, then you're stuck in old thought. And in old thought, you're really stuck in just a continuous vicious cycle over and over, where it's me against them. We're separated. You're just not going to go anywhere. So new thought to me is the way to liberation, and that has to start with you have to see divinity in everybody.
You must be born again. You will not inherit the kingdom of God unless you're born again. What is the born again experience? A new thought, thinking in a new way, and that's when you're open to the kingdom that's been within you. Jesus said the kingdom's within. So if we understand everything that Jesus was teaching is this wonderful metaphysical understanding of life, of the moving beyond the physical into the spiritual, of understanding exactly how beautifully expressed Steve shared it with us. If we're not in the new thought, we're in the old thought. We're not born again into a new way of thinking and a new way of looking at life. We're in the old way. And the old way, is Jesus is saying, is you won't inherit it. You won't understand it. You won't grasp it. It won't be there for you. It's there, but you will miss it. You'll be left behind in this consciousness. Things will move on without you. Let me tell you, divine flow is moving right now, and many of people are left behind from the divine flow of goodness because they just weren't ready. They weren't prepared. They weren't born again. They weren't thinking in a new way. They weren't embracing the teaching of truth. they're living in the old and struggling. So thank you. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for today's class. We'll look forward to seeing you next week at 10:30 a.m. for our ongoing study of the Book of Truth. And we encourage you to join us as well on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. for our services through City of Light. And if you are also available Tuesday nights, we've got a wonderful class on spiritual economics. That's live streamed 7 o'clock from the Dr. Angelo Pizzello Wisdom Center here at City of Light. Now, if you've enjoyed these classes, I want to encourage you to express, in the spirit of gratitude, some sort of gift or token of expression of saying, I appreciate what I've learned, I have gleaned, I have received, and when I receive, I want to give back. So you can go to our website at www.cityoflightatlanta.com and offer a gift through our donate button there. We appreciate your support of the Emerson Institute and the work that we're doing to bring about spiritual enrichment to our world. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a great week. I know God has something in store for you.